Hi, everybody. It's Bob here with the Vitality Project, and really happy and pleased that you would join me and my special guest tonight here. It's Friday night. We're kind of wrapping up the week. My special guest is none other than Angela MacLeod from Bellingham, Washington. Wonderful to have you here, Angela. Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So wonderful to have you joining us. Thank you. Angela, our topic for the day, our post today, is in a series of looking at the brain changes that are evident not only in our personal lives, but really impact our relationships, not only in active addiction, but also in early recovery. So we're looking at these brain changes in some detail. And the one that we're looking at tonight, has to do with craving, and how craving manifests not only inside the experience of the one who's addicted, whether it's to a substance or to some other behavior, but also how it shows up in relationships. And I'd love to touch on that and apply that today. I'd love you to bring whatever experiences you want to share, as well as I really want to honor your expertise in nervous system regulation, among other things, because craving tends to, especially in the context of addictive craving, tends to really upend the balance in our bodies around being able to regulate our anxiety, our depression, etc. So let's talk into that together. The title tonight is How to Claim the Truth That Sets You Free. And why I picked that title for today's post is that we're wanting to own up to the truth of how addiction affects our relationships as well as ourselves, and not in a shaming way, but in a way that hopefully will lead towards our being liberated from addiction. So it's in that spirit that we picked the title, and it's in that spirit that you and I can engage in this dialogue tonight. So okay. Thank you again. Any thoughts you have at all, Angela, on this topic? I know that you will have reflected on it.
Yeah. Well, what really caught my attention, not just in today's post, but in the series, the last number of days, maybe even the last week, as you kind of laid out the whole cycle of addiction. And it wasn't news to me, but it was just striking to me, both from my own experience with addiction, the 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that regardless of how much I was using, or when I would stop using and start again, etc., that there was a quality of it's just really going on all the time because of the withdrawal process, even being sober, but white knuckling it. And there's basically a sense of like constantly craving, when you're in that stage. And just to see that and understand that that is part of the addictive cycle, because we can get riveted on just not using or drinking or whatever it is, and not realize that there's this whole pattern involved. And really it actually brought up a lot of sadness for me because of how painful that is. It was very frightening for me, and because I could get chunks of time of being sober, but I was still in the addictive cycle, the process of craving, going through withdrawal, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and all of that. And just this awareness that sometimes the people around me would be so focused also on, is she using or not? And then again, that would then I would feel alone when I wasn't using. I'd feel alone with all the pain of the still that addictive cycle. So I guess it brought up for me that some compassion for that, for myself and for others who might still be doing that whole pattern. So there was that part. And then equally, it was painful too, to remember how impactful all that is on my relationships, every single one of them. And so, reading your post was a reminder of that. And also, right now, it brings up compassion for myself and for others, for how challenging that is for the people who aren't in addiction but are with their loved ones who are experiencing that too.
I just listening to you right now, Angela, it's bringing up an awareness that I didn't have even as I was preparing for today's posts, and reflecting on them myself. And I'll share with you the response that's coming up for me is that I think there's a lot of ignorance generally about addiction for the one who's addicted, him or herself. And specifically, I think there's a common misunderstanding that the addict is obviously, when they're intoxicated, it's kind of obvious. If it's intoxicated on alcohol or another drug, or for that matter, when they're really caught in some addictive behavior that's really problematic, it's almost like you're on automatic pilot. I think most people get that. And sadly, a lot of people have observed that with a father or a mother or a partner or however that all goes. But I don't think that there's an awareness, and you're speaking to it, generally speaking, this kind of 24/7 awareness that we're trying to get out in the airwaves, which is that the craving that precedes the actual intoxication or let's say indulgence of a certain behavior, engagement in a behavior, I think the craving can be as debilitating. In fact, I'm quite sure of it. I've done a fair bit of research on this around what happens to the brain, and you can't tell when somebody's in active craving. You look at a brain scan, you can't tell whether they're high or in craving. It's that much of an encumbrance. And we'll be talking more about post-acute withdrawal syndrome. I'm actually doing some research on that right now. I want to talk into that this coming week. So thank you for kind of paving that. But there's another piece that really came up for me, and it wasn't one that I don't think I gave enough time and thought to. And you're saying it with your incredible sensitivity. You always are. Let's see if I can gather my thoughts for just a minute. It's an awareness for me as I'm listening to you that not only is the addictive cycle close to a 24/7 phenomenon for the one addicted, but it's a 24/7 cycle for the one who's in a relationship to the one addicted, particularly the closest. And I think I've known that intellectually, but I don't think I've ever hit right on that head until I listened to you. And actually, I can feel my eyes begin to tear up as you're talking about the sadness. Carl Jung talked about drinking our bitter cup of grief. There's a lot of grief that you and I both have, and we've shared this with those that are closest to us. They themselves aren't exposed not only to our being intoxicated or otherwise derailed, let's say, by addiction in its most obvious phase, but they're subject to the 24/7 time clock of the addictive cycle around craving. And we've talked about it. We'll talk more about it. Also, the withdrawal phase on the other side. So it's kind of ramping up to the actual engagement with the addictive behavior or substance by virtue of craving. And then it's the follow through, which is itself really treacherous for the one who's addicted. But it's also a time of fear and unreliability and probably betrayal of expectations and disappointment for the one who cares for the one in addiction. I just feel like you've just expanded it for me in a way that's very helpful. I hope that anybody who's listening might have ears to hear that if you yourself have been in addiction, you know the interior of what Angela and I are talking about. If you're the loved one of someone in addiction, I would hope that you would take to heart that somebody like Angela is well aware these days of the pain and the suffering that is yours as well as a loved one of somebody who's in active addiction. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I noticed here that Spencer, a dear friend Spencer, has written a quote here. I've never read this. The quote, "The truth shall set you free," is obvious. Well, I don't know, it's obvious. It's extracted from the New Testament. In my earlier days, I could tell you what chapter and verse, but I'm long since beyond having that kind of intimate familiarity with the New Testament. But he has a quote here. You can probably see it. "The truth shall this is a tired Bobby tonight. "The truth shall set you free, but first it will make you miserable," by James Garfield. Well said, dear Spencer. That puts the nail right on the head. And I think that's implied in what you right. I think it's implied in what you're saying. There's such sadness and grief in this if we're honest with ourselves. And the truth implies that we're being honest with ourselves. It's really, really painful. really painful to sit with this kind of grief. Not only what we've caused ourselves or has been inflicted upon us, oftentimes I think it's more like that. It's inflicted on us by this disease that overtakes our willpower. But the pain, you know, the 12-step programs call it the wreckage of the past, the horrible wreckage of the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another thought that I wanted to share in response to the post this week is it reminded me of how helpful it has been for me to get an understanding of the science behind the pattern that we're talking about. So I have the experience of it. I know what it's like. And for so many years before I kind of came to understanding a lot through your information that you've shared and through others too, it's really reduced shame for me. It's more, it made me aware of how alone and isolated I felt just living in that cycle, and how I turned that into, oh, I'm such an awful person because of this thing that I'm doing, this problem that I have, this enslavement and all of that. So to just understand that, not to get myself off the hook or come up with excuses, but just to realize that there are things beyond my control once I got engaged in that cycle of addiction. Reduce some of the shame, which then led me to be more motivated to take action and to not feel quite as awful about everything. And really the point is, as you've mentioned, it shifted me more into rightful guilt and out of the debilitating shame.
Thank you.
You know, and so there's a lot of work to do still, you know, even though I understand that my brain is hijacked, as you have said, and that reduces my self-shame, that doesn't mean there isn't more work to do. For sure, there's tons.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you're saying. I know that for me, and you and I have talked about this at length over all the years we've known each other, Angela, I know that for me, the self-condemnation nearly took me out. It certainly kept me in my addiction, even when my intentions were good. So I kept relapsing in the first few years. I kept trying to manage my drinking, manage my drug taking, and that was a disaster of epic proportion. But earliest in recovery, I just felt completely overwhelmed by shame. And my instinct or my intuition was, if I don't find some way to deal with this, it's going to be the end of me. Certainly it'll be the end of my recovery. I couldn't get my recovery really, I couldn't get it going in any kind of sustained way. That was clear. But I felt like that I might just drink and drug myself to death. And so I knew it was imperative. And I was thinking as I was listening to you, I don't know that I've thought of it quite this way. You know, I had 30 years as a clinical psychologist to precede my getting into recovery. I certainly was increasingly in addiction in the latter part of my career as a psychologist. But my career as a psychologist, both my training, but also my experience for those decades, was that, you know, I worked day in, day out trying to help clients to do what I call, or what we call in psychology, externalize the problem, so that they don't personalize the problem. That was the whole focus of last Saturday's workshop, to not personalize addiction. Somebody wrote me, I think they really misunderstand what I was saying. They said, are you saying not to take it seriously? No, in fact, the only way to take it seriously, in my view, is to not personalize it. It's too important to personalize it, because if we personalize it, we get stuck right there. It's what you just said. We get like a deer in the headlights. And so I take it with utmost seriousness, but my background in psychology suggested to me that, for example, if I'm depressed, or if I'm anxious, or if I have some other psychological vulnerability, the first task is to be able to look at it objectively, to find out what's going on, and then create a treatment plan, ideally that will help resolve it or help me manage it. And so it occurred to me, as I was neck deep or deeper in shame, I've got to find some way to externalize this. And it was a natural thing for me to turn to the psychological and even the medical research on this, because my background in psychology was doing scientific research. I mean, that's the basis of contemporary psychology. There are theories, but they're all rooted in empirical research. So I began that task myself and had a lot of help. There were a lot of good people out there. And this last Saturday, I handed out what I called an essential bibliography with 5 or 6 references that to me are just required reading for somebody if they want to handle this in this way. I am quite sure there are a million different ways to approach reduction of shame. I just did what worked for me. And or I thought would work for me, and in fact it did work for me. And it was looking at addiction with a clear eye, taking a step back from it, realizing that I'm not the devil, addiction is. And I mean that in the sense of addiction is a completely incapacitating disease. It's kind of like none other, because you can look at somebody who's got the disease and they look fine. They don't have a skin rash. They're not necessarily, at least until it's really in its later stages, frail and falling over, but they can just be completely, I'm going to say this and I mean it literally, completely brainless. I was, in terms of the parts of my brain that matter. And so I found reading about it, studying it, becoming literate in it, really kind of 101. That was recovery 101 for me. And I was thinking about it this morning, Angela. I was getting ready for my day of work, is that over the years, what's happening, and you know me to know, it's the message is winnowing itself down. It's not getting more complicated. It's actually getting more concentrated. I was laughing this morning as I was working on a post where I talked about, I think this is the simplest model of the brain anywhere. And it's just like talking about the brain in the simplest of ways. And it's not to be condescending, it's to be strategic. I want to be like a laser beam. Here's stuff that could be effective for you. I want to make it as clearly communicated as possible so that you can take this and apply this immediately in your life. And so I think by the end of my days, I may be down to just like one word or maybe even silence. I don't know, because I'm getting more and more distilled in it for sure. That's an aspiration for sure. But I think you get what I'm saying, is that it's a very complicated disease, and the resolution of addiction is as complicated as we are. But in another way, I want to provide as much ease of entry into that and as much support in as clear a form as I can. And I feel like you too, you write with such incredibly clear articulation. That's the aim here, is to kind of cut through all the dross. I'm well aware that what you and I do, we bring overlapping skills for sure to the table. What you and I do won't be everybody's cup of tea, and that's absolutely as it should be. I just want to provide for people what I think worked for me, and I want you to bring to our conversations, you do, what's working for you. And let's bring that and let that be a part of the conversation. There are people for whom more traditional answers to addiction recovery are not working, and I was one of them. I was one of them. I needed something broader and richer and deeper, at least as I view it, than what was being proffered me, or I knew it wasn't going to be sufficient. And this piece about shame and about trying to move through this with skill, it was primary, it was front and center for me. And I needed to find a way with it. And this is my way. This is my best attempt. And it's been effective for me. I see it in my work with my clients. You do with yours. And it continues to get refined. I'm not nearly done with this model of refining it, but I see the effectiveness. It's very gratifying to me to hear you talk about how you've been able to apply all that you know, plus whatever it is I've contributed. And I take what you provide me and what I've learned, and I apply it every day. And I know you're the same way. It's an ongoing daily practice, and it's rooted in the things that we're talking about even tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. You remind me that I want to bring in a little bit about the nervous system.
I'd love you to do that. I'd love you to. Yeah.
I really feel like looking at this whole topic of addiction through the lens of what is happening on our nervous system level. And the latest neuroscience is that when we're dysregulated, and what I mean by that is when we're in an extreme and our nervous system is in fight or flight mode, very stressed, or we're in a more flattened out, depressed mode, which often is the case for a lot of people. You know, that there can be kind of a chronic level that's not super extreme, but where you kind of bounce between them. And at the nervous system level, that is very difficult to live in that. And I believe that is part of my own experience of what led me to addiction. We don't go to addiction because we want to be addicted. We kind of fall into it, most of us do, kind of naively, you know, using substances or behaviors because there's a sense of relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there wasn't a sense of relief, we wouldn't return to it over and over. What are we relieving?
Yeah.
Well, on the nervous system level, we find a sense of relief, relaxation, pleasure in the beginning.
Yes.
It doesn't stay that way, and that's part of the problem. Is the addictive process, the substance or the behavior, doesn't solve the problem for the nervous system, but it gives us a moment of feeling okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we become addicted to that because we want to feel okay. So for me, instead of the addictive use of substance,
Yes.
and I also had an eating disorder.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's more of a behavioral addiction to manage my stress.
You know this, Angela, but I don't want to say this. 90% of us have some behavioral addiction, whether it's the way the way that eating serves us and doesn't, in the way that you're saying, or sex, or our work, or gambling, or the internet. We can just go on and on with the list. 90% of us have that, which is tantamount to saying addiction is universal. It's not the province of just those substance abusers. 1 out of 4 of us are addicted to substance. 90% of us are addicted to some behavior other than substance. And so I appreciate you naming that. And you know, from our previous conversations, I've got 5 other addictive behaviors that I'm monitoring every day. Addiction to alcohol and drugs is just 1 of 6 for me. And that's the way it is for me. That's the truth. Anyway, please continue.
Just the basic thing for me is that once I understood that, that's been fairly recent, that I've understood that how the nervous system is functioning or in dysregulation. I discovered it by starting a practice with Qigong, a movement and mindfulness practice. And I did it enough to start to feel more calm and relaxed without using a substance or a behavior. And it was like a light bulb in terms of, oh, it's okay to want to relax. You know, like in a way, I even demonized my own reaching towards alcohol. Like that's bad for me to want to relax, you know. And but to find healthy ways to shift that nervous system out of that chronic stress or chronic depressed mode is kind of a passion of mine, because that's what has been working for me, among other things. And I love what you were saying. We all have, it's almost like I feel like we almost need to personalize, customize our own recovery program.
Beautifully said.
And there can be many different aspects to that, you know, nervous system, relational, psychological, shadow work. So it's not a one size fits all. And that's what I love about how you approach all of this, Bob, is that you really open the field really widely. And
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. It's very, very kind of you to say that. I know that we're of similar hearts this way. You make me think of something, Angela. I've talked about it more generally, about it, that we've spoken about it. I just spoke earlier today to our mutual colleague, Doug Prater.
Oh, nice.
Angela and I met each other through the Journey of Integral Recovery podcast. Those are available on YouTube, Journey of Integral Recovery, which is really the spirit of what you just said, Angela. And Doug has agreed to come on starting in a couple of weeks. Every other Wednesday night, Doug will be coming on with me, just like you and I are right now on every Friday night. Doug will be coming on, and we'll be, thank you for that. I feel exactly the same way. He'll be joining me, and you'll be joining us hopefully when you can come, you know, as a Greek chorus or whatever like that, giving us questions and supporting us. But Doug has a heart for this, just as you know he does. And so between you and me meeting on Friday nights, Doug will be joining me on every other Wednesday night. And on the in-between nights is Michael Morar, who Michael brings a critical psychological perspective, among other things, to the field. It opens up the aperture to include, I hope, a lot more diversity in terms of how diverse approaches, let's say, to how we understand addiction, hopefully with the goal of unshaming ourselves or destigmatizing, but also it just opens up the creative doors, it feels like to me, of just what you said. I love how you put it, that we would customize our approaches to recovery makes all the sense in the world to me. And that's the spirit of what we're bringing. You bring a lot of skills to the table. I bring what I bring. And hopefully people can find their way inspired by what we're talking about. You know, I just yesterday morning did a meditation online with 𝗖𝗹𝗶𝗶𝗺, you know, the Be Awake meditation. And one of the things I was aware of is that I've done this forgiveness practice, and you're very aware of it. You participated with me. I introduced that online yesterday. We did an hour meditation online, but it was so crucial to me, and it just came up spontaneously, both introducing it as well as we listened to the DVD that I had created, and I'd forgotten that it was actually in the script of the DVD, is that it was there too, which is that the point isn't to mimic this. The point is to take what works here, delete what doesn't work, and modify this at will to make it suit you. And that's really the whole point here, is to customize it, as you say, whatever it is that works for us. And so I love that spirit too, Angela. Thank you. Thank you. Angela, we're gonna have to wind up in just a moment. Do you have any final thoughts or parting wishes before we finish for today?
Not really. Just that. Well, I just really love what you said. You know, that it's not a one size fits all. But I did say that the customizing idea. I just would want to reinforce that and encourage people. You know, that forgiveness practice that you created, I have used that for myself, and I've shared it with recovery groups that I've been in. People love it, and I modify it too. And I encourage people to modify it. You know, take the pieces that work for you. I don't know if there's enough encouragement for that in our culture. That we seem to think that if we don't do it just exactly as the teacher said or something, that we're not doing it right. And I am all for creativity and really listening to what really is working for you.
Yeah. There'll be more to follow for sure. I want to recommend that everybody come back again next Friday night to join Angela. This is a weekly ritual for us. And I think the spirit of inclusiveness and embracing diverse approaches to understanding addiction and might be our personal path to addiction, to the healing of it, feels like it's embodied in our conversation. So I want everybody to keep coming back to join us. I also want to recommend, Angela, you and I are involved together with others in the weekly private groups for the Vitality Project, which are extremely meaningful to me. And part of what I love about them is exactly what we're talking about right now. They embody this kind of open-mindedness, I think critical thinking, all of that. And it's just, it's a treasure to me. Our groups are a treasure. And I want to invite anybody that has a hankering for what Angela is describing tonight in terms of customization. Our conversations in our groups oftentimes center around individuals sharing resources that they found useful. And they're given with open hand. It's like, you might consider trying reading this book or watching this video or trying this practice of mine. And I love that about the group. I've never once felt kind of imposed upon or cornered in the group. Certainly don't bring that myself. And so I'd like to invite anybody that has a hankering to join us. Our groups meet on Tuesday and Thursday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time. We have some people that come from different parts of the world to join us, and we just try to find a time where people can join us. If you live in Australia, you can join us. I know, because we have Australians join us. If you live in Central America, if you live on the East Coast. And so really, please give that some serious thought. The fee is of concern. I'm worried about that. It's for free. There's no fee for it. And we just want to invite you. It's a resource. And so
there's so much kindness and compassion in those groups too. I find that to be, especially in this time of limited contact, to find a safe place with people who are very genuine and full of heart. It's very good.
Yeah, I agree. It's a real oasis. I can't remember if it was you or another one of our group members the other day that said, we can't believe that people aren't banging down the doors for this. And I feel the same way. I love the size of our group. And so the banging down, is only of concern to me if it changed the tenor of the group, but I'd love it to open it to anybody that has eyes to see and ears to hear what we're talking about. It's definitely, it's an embodiment of what you've shared tonight, Angela, and always do. So I want to recommend that. We'll have daily posts here at the Vitality Project on Facebook, daily posts on YouTube. We'll be back next Wednesday night with Michael 𝗏𝗏 is going to join me on Wednesday night with the Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And then next Friday again with you, Angela. Angela, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really so much appreciate your presence and loving kindness and wisdom. Really, really much appreciated.
It's wonderful to be with you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Angela, I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
I wish everybody a good weekend. Please stay safe, be well, and come back and join us again soon here. All right, my dear.
Bye.
Good night to you. Bye-bye for now.